Well, welcome. Um, yeah, this will be a fun one. So we can get some participation and kind of see where our participants today are at, and it be confidential. I'm not going to say anybody's name, but chat, um, answer questions, ask questions in any way you want to today. As Heather says, I'm an Orem. I'm a clinical director, clinical therapist there in the Orem office. And I am a CFLE. So in my undergrad, I got my certification for family life educating. And I just got my little pin in the mail yesterday. I'm at a 10-year with them. It's an ongoing certification. I have to do so much education. I love it. Education in that way. And family life education is great because, of course, where I got that certification and my degree at that university, I taught out of a book that I'm going to share today a lot about. I taught marriage relations at that university. So love, 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 love teaching relationship stuff. Now, if you're in a relationship, if you want to be in one, if you are dating, if you're young, old, this is hopefully for anyone. If you have, 20 something year olds and you've got kiddos that are going through that, watch this and listen to this book and some ideas about this. This is going to be pretty psychoeducational, connected to science and books because that's what it is. And there's a lot of difference between love versus science. We're going to go science because that's what I do is connect it to a book. Also, like Heather says, just chat me, and we'll be checking for those. So any way that you want to communicate during this. Okay, so we are going to start with reviewing Gottman's books. We're going to talk about how to avoid falling in love with the jerk, Sue Johnson, dating tools, some obstacles. I also can answer questions about the upcoming couples workshop that starts Monday. If you're registered for that, that's a great one. It's a 5-week program, little couples boot camp starting Monday. So sign up for that if you want to too, and ask questions about that. With that said, let's talk about why we would want to be in a committed long-term relationship or just a committed relationship at all, right? Science, there's just so many benefits to that. So you're like, oh, but my body tells me that it's not. It's anxiety provoking. I have fears. I have lots of attachment issues. I have lots of wounds. I have lots of hurt. I have lots of trauma. I have lots of everything. And so it's like, no, my body tells me that committed relationships, and premarital, pre anything, pre stuff, because of post stuff, right? Yeah. So anybody want to start chatting about why this pre stuff causes us to have post stuff? So what I'm talking about is, future, past, and why we go into those. Why it is so scary to, have those things come up when we're thinking about a long-term relationship or getting into a long-term relationship. The fears just come up. Trust after betrayal. Yes, because betrayal is a betrayal of trust, and that's an attachment. So anytime we go into trust something, it's an attachment wound. We can go, oh, we don't want to be in, this place again. And just a reminder, if you have your video on, It will be in the YouTube channel, recording forever. So if you want to just turn off your video, you can. The fear of uncertainty and change. So uncertainty is that. So I call it scarcity too. Like, ugh, scarcity. I don't like scarcity. Brene Brown talks about scarcity. I talk about scarcity all the time. What's coming up in the fear is always something with scarcity. I don't know if this will work out. Scarcity. Um, so what happens with a long-term relationship though is why we keep yearning for it. We're wired for it. We don't need to go into caveman wiring, but we are. We still are 100% wired for connection. We want long-term attachment because it reduces depression, anxiety, suicidality. It really does, diseases. We have chronic inflammation is lower. We have just lower stress in general. But I know it's like, no, being in a relationship is stressful. I don't like being, in betrayal trauma from my past relationship. But it increases well-being in the children. Of course, a committed relationship with children, of course it does. We know statistically, and this book and a lot of other books go through what that I learned for 4 years in family studies degree, what your chances are if you're if you are a product of a divorce, if you're a child that your parents got divorced, all the statistics that show what your chances are of having a healthy relationship and ones that don't as much. We can always beat some of those things, but then some of them are just there and we have to work a little extra, right? Harder to learn about our attachment or to prevent a divorce when we are a product of divorced parents. Your physical health, your financial stability increases, your oxy hormone, of course, like, you have more sex, there's more satisfaction all around. And we are not going to get into the other statistics. If you're in an abusive, unhealthy relationship, it doesn't increase these at all. So a healthy, long-term committed relationship, there's lots of great reasons why to be in one. So if I can just share anything with you today and anything that you can take away, if there's one person in this workshop or that watches this later that has never heard of John and Julie Gottman, and I apologize, I was going to add Julie to that PowerPoint because in one of my other PowerPoints it says John and Julie, and this one it just says John, but Julie and John are very much a team. They wrote multiple books together. My favorite they have, made it to my top 5 books, of course. And I'll share that book with you that's in my top 5 that will never leave. This book is in my top 5, How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. Will never leave my top 5 books. And I have hundreds. So yeah, we're going to go over just what they have produced, what they're 45. I think he's 78-ish now, 45 to 50 years of research and their findings and their love maps, building love maps, their research on all of relationship building and why relationships fail and why relationships succeed. We have it scientifically. There is no doubt. There's too much long-term research. So I go by the research. And so we're going to definitely go over their stuff, right? But that's just some of their inventions of the 4 horsemen and stress reducing conversations and aftermath. They actually have a new book coming out in January that's about after the fight. So they have so many books right now that are very, very good. So let's go to those. What makes love last? The love prescription is one of the last ones. So that I have picked up that I love that I did some of this work in my workshop that's called Falling in Love Again on the YouTube channel already. 7 days to more intimacy, connection, and joy. 7 principles of making a marriage work, of course, is their main one. I actually saw them live with 8 Dates when that came out. They came to Salt Lake, and that was the only time I've seen them live. It was just a checklist, bucket list thing, right? But the Men's Guide to Women is in my top 5 books. So this one, for anything, this will never leave my top 5. This will never leave my top 5. I don't care if you're in a relationship or not, or wanting to be, or in love with a jerk or not with a jerk, and then jerkette, or you're a woman or a man. It doesn't matter about this one, Men's Guide to Women. So and of course, really good audiobook that listen, because it's very deep. I like to listen to it over and over and over again. Is The Science of Trust by John Gottman, that attunement for couples. So there's the stack for right now. 8 Dates is really fun. Love Prescription's fun. But Men's Guide, so making a marriage work, that's, along the way. Of course, I have the relationship repair, the relationship cure, I mean. This one I grabbed from my Orem office because it's not on here, but this is one of my ones that go to. So there's just so many, right? This one's 5 steps to strengthening your marriage, family, and relationships. So why am I talking about marriage, right? Why am I talking about marriage? Well, because hopefully this workshop is about premarital. So how you do the premarital stuff, and we're going to definitely, capture that. But the whole point is, how do you keep your marriage or your long-term committed cohabiting relationship going? That's the key, right? Getting into one is great, but statistically, you want to stay in one and make it as healthy as possible. Hopefully, you're not just all, oh, I'm just here to just destroy people's heart and rip it out of them and throw it in the garbage and then squash it and then put it back in. Oh, okay. If someone's done that to you, you don't want that to happen again, maybe, and you don't want to do that to someone else. And there's a science to learning how not to do that. Yes, the small things do turn into the big things, but how do the small things is how you'll do the big things. So you're talking about patterns there. Someone just chatted that. And that is this book, Patterns. So how you fall in love with patterns or potential is what we're going to talk about. Okay, so first we got to go, okay, what is your balance? Protection, growth, connection, sacrifice, foundation. The foundation is the foundation of the house, the foundation, the love maps that Gottman talks about. Where's your balance? Once again, we are wired for connection. We have to have some sacrifice. We have to find the foundation first, though. How do we protect ourselves? That's the roof, right? Something like that analogy. And how do you grow into a relationship? Whether it's 2 weeks, whether it's 30 years, whether it's, you don't have a relationship yet. You want one like that. So again, here's the house. I'm a family therapist, family educator. The rooms in the house are very important. It gets very scientific for me with how you were raised, your birth order, your togetherness, your trauma, your attachment, which is all childhood, comes out in adulthood. Okay, it does. If anyone wants to argue with me about that, let's have it out. Let's talk about how your past in your childhood and your family of origin does not affect your today. And we can talk about generational trauma. That's what I do. So this family time, oh, self-care, where's your balance? How productive the together, but think about how you were raised. What are some things that you want to take with you and some things that you don't? That's okay. No blame, no shame. So how do we build love maps? The foundation, the building of the love maps here on the side of this sound relationship house. Okay. This is scientific. Here's trust, that's your attunement, that's your attachment, and here's commitment on the side. Those have to go up, those have to continually be worked on. So, how do we get to create shared meaning at the very top? That's a little bit of work, right? Because we got to get to dreams and managing conflict and turning towards each other. And first, we have to build the love maps. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? How do you build love maps? Anybody read Gottman stuff? How do you get to the top? Anybody that's in here that is married that wants to have their marriage better, you could be in here or you're in a relationship. How have you built those love maps? Knowing each other. That's the key. How do you know each other? Well, Gottman's got some great tools that I'm going to give you today that you can use. There's questions, there's a card deck app. Anybody use the card deck app? You can chat that. Say, yes, I've used the card deck. Let a few people in here. So let's see. I have, surface emotion feelings. Yes. Good. You know what I'm talking about a little bit. Okay, good. Because it's been around a long time. These Julie and John Gottman, they've been around a long time. So creating shared shared meaning. So the thing is okay, that sounds great. We're going to create, these dreams and have shared meaning. What if you don't know what your meaning is? What your real, true, higher purpose, I call higher purpose in why we're doing anything, why we go to work, why we're having children, why we're, buying a house, why we're saving. If there's no meaning behind it, it's really difficult to have dreams and then manage conflict with it, have boundaries around it, and then have a positive perspective about it, and then turn towards each other and go back down the house and go to shared fondness, admiration, right? Um, so we got to go from the bottom up, but then we also have to go from the top down all the time, back and forth. Okay. So building love maps is, let's just talk about that much because that's all we need to start with. And then we're going to definitely talk about bids turning towards each other because that's key in his scientific research of why a relationship stays together or does not is bids. And if you don't know what bids are, good, because I'm going to teach you what a bid is. So, what are bids? I have to move this off my slide a little bit. So, mindless moments, made mindful. Okay, bids are a bid for connection. Okay, so I always just use this little analogy. So you're you're walking towards the door to a store, the grocery store thing. It's not an automatic door opener, and someone's in front of you. They hold the door open and let you walk through, and they smile at you, and you smile back, or you say thank you, or oh, thank you so much, and you smile. The person that was holding the door was bidding for a connection, not purposely. It was just mindful. It was mindless to be mindful. It wasn't a big deal. They didn't like think about it like, oh, I want connection right now. So I'm going to hold the door open for this person and I'm going to feel so good about myself. And this other person's going to say thank you to me. And right? Yeah. But what if you walked through the door and ignored the person? You look down, you're like, and just hurried and walked through it. You didn't say thank you. You didn't look at the person. You didn't smile. That's turning against the bid. That's a little bit more intentional. It's automatic sometimes to just say, oh, thank you, to a complete stranger. So think about now a way deeper thing. Your kid is sitting at the table and they're like, I hate math. I hate doing math. They're 7 and they are just so frustrated and they throw their pencil. Was that a bid for connection? Or was that a tantrum? Or was that a, oh, my kid's being a brat? If we look at every single thing with a human as a bid for connection, it changes us. That was a bid for connection. The child needed to be parent oriented and they were in an, maybe not okay way, your opinion, or an okay way of saying, I'm frustrated. I need some connection. They didn't say I needed help. They didn't say I needed this. They needed connection because they felt, right, whatever that feeling was. And so when you go to your partner's beds for connection, it's every little text, it's everything. Thank you for doing this. Hey, can you help me with this? It's a bid for connection. Now you have two choices, basically. You turn against or you turn toward. And that fills up the bank account like Covey's emotional bank account, right? And that leads to romance, intimacy, deeper connection, trust. And I can give you a whole list that I'm going to give you in another handout that I've made that shows all of what that does. So it causes space for repair. It causes space for trust, huge amounts of trust. And it builds up to this level. So bids, okay? So, and I have another statistic I'm sure I'm going to get to in a minute, but I'll just tell you now. If you are turning against bids 70% of the time in your relationship, 96% chance, statistically, by Gottman, will fail. Let me say it again. If your bids are turned against, the person is turning against that bid. And I'm going to explain what that looks like because we did one towards, right? If you say hello or you say thank you for someone opening the door, that's a bid and you turn toward it. Ignoring it would have been turning against it. So if you got mad at your child for throwing the pencil, that was turning against the bid, even though you got a negative connection and you had some, right, some kind of connection there, but it was not a turning towards. So if you turn against those bids 70% of the time, you're going to have some serious trust issues. Your relationship's going to possibly end, very high percentage. And Gottman actually predicts that in 6 minutes. He looks at a couple he has seen, and tally marking and how you repair, how you deal with conflict. I do a lot of how do you deal with, and I want you to write this down. How do you deal with disappointment? How have you done disappointment in the past relationships? How do you deal with disappointment with your kids, your parents, your coworker? How do you deal with disappointment? Do you bid toward it or against it? Do you get angry, get defensive, go into your trauma defense mechanisms when you have disappointment? And then when you set out to bid for connection for repair, how does the other person respond to you? So how do we find out who the other person is? So if you're bidding for connection, you're bidding for something, you're asking a question sometimes, or most of the time I like statements. Hey, how was your day? Question mark. Or, hey, how did that one thing go at work today? Question mark. Or what was your favorite part of the day? Question mark. Okay, we're getting lots of question marks, right? Statements are very vital to do first. I see that you're upset, right? With the kid throwing his pencil. I see that you're late. Tell me more about that. And you bid for connection. You bid for an understanding. So how do you do that on a normal basis? Well, you pick a deck of cards. This is the app over here that you can download, and you start finding out about the other person. And then
Hey,
we get,
Carol, I just received a message. Someone said, if I'm not responding well to disappointment, what could I change? Sometimes I find myself disappointed after being turned down, and then I turn away.
So how do I deal with disappointment? And then when I am disappointed, I shut down and turn away from the bed. So that's your avoidant attachment that comes up from fear of rejection, from, right? The disappointment of that. That's a little deeper work, right? So it's like, oh, so now you know that. So that was nothing to do about it right now, but to know that you wrote that down and said, this is how I deal with disappointment. Some of the times I shut down. I go into my avoidant attachment. So then I can't connect at all because that's an attachment issue. And then we go, oh, how do we get into a secure attachment? I could talk for hours on attachment, which is a totally different subject of like, which is so important because attachment is where you will shut that bit off and turn against it or turn toward it. So a secure attachment looks like, oh, wait, I don't need to turn against the bid when I am dealing with disappointment. So you turn toward it because avoiding it will never work. So I'm disappointed that, something didn't get done. The follow through, which we're going to talk about in Men's Guide. The follow through. I'm disappointed that my partner did not follow through. Okay. How many times have they not followed through? Multiple times? Oh, we got a pattern now. So do you sabotage it? Do you punish the person? Do you shut down? Do you talk to the person, turn toward them and say, I'm pretty disappointed that didn't get done today. Now the other person's going to be like, well, now I'm disappointed in you that you brought it up and that you're trying to tell me what to do. Now we got to fight in 30 seconds, right? So really going to your partner and saying, how do you deal with disappointment? This is how I tend to deal with disappointment. And then again, going back to your family of origin, to that little family house. How did your parents deal with disappointment? And I don't have this book referenced, but it's called It Didn't Start With Me. It Didn't Start With You. That's what it's called. It Didn't Start With You, and it's about generational trauma. Mark Wolin. It Didn't Start With Me. It's actually me. I couldn't decide. You or me, something like that. So just go back and say, just some awareness. Wow, how did my parents deal with disappointment? How did I deal with disappointment as a child? And then talk to your partner about that. Hopefully that helps. So what's your partner's, fondest dream? Unrealized, unrealistic dream even, right? Dream together. And so each point given is these card decks. I think there's like 10 or 12, and they're super fun to just go through. I used to, like, we haven't done it for a while, but like when we go on little road trips, me and my husband would while he was driving, I would just go through the questions. And so, by the way, if you both have the same one, then you have at the end of the card deck the ones that you have in common. And just so you know, the sex questions are really good. And there's about 400 of them about masturbation. So you can just decide if you like those or not. and what to talk about and how to do that. Open-ended questions, love maps. Yeah, it just goes on and on. So, and my tip for that is if you're dating, pick one, make it that focus for the month, just like I do the love languages. Whatever their love language is, pick that and work on it for that month. The other person's love language. Do bids towards that card deck or that person's love language. And this is just here because this is just here. I'm going to skip over it mostly, but it's a great little book. Okay. So it's like the 8 dates. It's like, okay, here's 8 dates, here's 7 days for intimacy. So 70% of conflict does not get resolved. That is Gottman's statistic. So I tell couples like, okay, if 70% of conflict is never resolved, how about 100% of conflict is never resolved? We don't fix anything. We manage it. So I tell people just plan on managing conflict because it's not ever going to be resolved because you don't know when it's going to come up again. And it doesn't matter because nothing gets fixed permanently because that would be perfectionism. And that's not how we fix things. A tire doesn't get fixed, it gets patched or replaced, and then it wears out again. So you have to continually maintain your tires, rotate, get new ones, maintain your car. And I always use the tire analogy for that. So there's just some simple things, right? Of like, okay, the bids, right? 70-30. 70% of the time you turn toward the bids, you're going to be pretty okay. And the 4 horsemen and the telemarking and how you repair, but ask for what you need. Like, for example, on page 107, it talks about physical, attunement and, intimacy, how to do that. Okay. So 8 dates. Again, just some ideas. This book, trust, vulnerability, jumping in with both feet, cherish commitment, lean on me, for example, date 1. So then you go through, and it gives you great ideas on how to go through those dates. And you can just be guided through those. If anyone gets through 8 dates and does that, wow. Kudos to you and going through the process of having some fun there. So this is an example of the date. This one's like sex and intimacy. When we get to that point, if you're in a committed relationship and you're doing that, and that's what that date is about. Exploring, discussing romance, sex, physical intimacy, whatever that looks like. And then it gives you a location. So this is just an example, right? So fun stuff. Okay, so let's go into some tips here about bids again, because that's the key to keeping a relationship healthy, and premarital. So, and then we're going to definitely go into my jerk book, right? So, Men's Guide to Women is a book for women. Don't let that title get you wrong and all tangled up. It's like, oh, where's my women's guide to men? Well, there's some of those out there for sure. This is the most scientific though. Julie and John Gottman, of course, wrote it again, and it shares what and how to continually be a hero in the relationship. And of course, he's talking about the male, zeros and heroes, and what that looks like. But if you turn away from your partner's bed too many times, you might not be there when you finally turn to them again, is the key. So betrayals, someone said something about betrayal. Betrayals don't happen out of the blue, but as a result of long-term secrets, unexpressed feelings, and moments of disconnection. Okay. Um, yes. So in any kind of relationship, Gottman has done heterosexual, gay and lesbian couples. Um, and there's several. If you go to his website, of course, there's multiple articles on how his research has been guided towards any type of relationship, honestly. So um, men, women, it's just a super good guide in general to be a hero or a zero. So yes, it is, by the way. You can relate it to any gender, honestly. I love listening to, I think I've listened to it with my husband a couple times and at least 2 or 3 times. And it's just like I learned so much about me listening to that. So this is why if you want to be in a healthy relationship eventually or now, you have to understand the ins and outs of science and love. And the zeros are not heroes if you don't share feeling, meaning, understanding. You don't take breaks. This is scientific. Taking a break is one of the best things you could ever do. You don't display empathy. You don't have validation. Okay. Empathy is validation too. It's like, ah, oh, seems like you're really upset. Seems like you're really disappointed. And if I say I'm disappointed, and it's like, oh, so you're disappointed. Okay. Okay. This is going to be hard, but tell me more about that. What are you disappointed about? Oh, yeah. You're a disappointment? No, I feel disappointed. Now, if the other person takes it on as, oh, I'm a disappointment, then we got a problem. Okay. Yes, thanks for asking about taking a break. That's key. So yes, disaster, not a rock. I mean, so if you're gonna be a rock, you're just gonna be like fixed and solid and like, you know, um, so fix, correct the problem before validation. So that's a zero if you want to fix the problem before validation. That's pretty typical, right? Right? We want to go to fixing the tire and fixing the disappointment. And that's not what anyone ever wants unless they say it. Um, okay, so go back to taking breaks. Okay, let me just quickly tell you about his statistics in the Love Lab that he had lots and lots of couples. He's followed couples for over 25 years after they've left the Love Lab. So one example of this is he has the male all wired up, the female or vice versa, or a gay couple, doesn't matter. They're all wired up, right? I'm just going to tell you about males in this particular situation. He has them wired up, and he says, okay, I'm recording you. I'm watching your vitals. I'm, watching your heart rate and all of your physical and emotional and signs. And they're recording this, right? And he says, okay, start up a conflict. Talk about a conflict you had recently. And the couple goes in on it, right? And then after not very many minutes, maybe 10 or 15 minutes too, he stops them and goes, wait, wait, wait. Please go out in the hall. Don't talk to each other. Look at this magazine. And there's some technical difficulties. We've got to fix your wires and we've got to fix something in the back here, And he puts them out in the hall. Men, in general, literally men, because you guys are the hunters, took 30%, 30 times, not 30, 3 times longer to come out of flooding after talking about a conflict or any kind of flooding. So it took them longer to come down out of their physiological responses, okay, than women. So that's called flooding. He talks about flooding. So why do we need to take a break? Well, he put them out in there in the out in the hallway for a reason. It was an experiment. Guess which couples did better, way better with their physical repair, their physically response, their repair of the conflict, of being more empathetic, bidding towards each other, everything on the planet. The couples that had a break. He put them out there for 10 minutes. Everything calmed down. They came back in and he says, okay, start up the conflict again. Tell me about your conflict. Those couples did immensely better at talking about the conflict. So take a break. Number one rule, take a break. The rule is 10 minutes to 24 hours. And I talk about those in lots of my workshops, how to take a break in all kinds of ways. If you feel threatened and flooded, this one listed here, threatened, you are a hunter and you go into flooding and you feel threatened and you're not going to pet the saber-tooth tiger. You're going to fight it. So that's what you're wired for. So we like taking a break when we're talking about conflict. You do not need to, fight the saber-tooth tiger. You've got to calm that part of your body so you could be back in your frontal lobes. Flooding is not your frontal lobes. Okay, so this is the handout I was talking about. This is my handout that to understand the steps that we have to go through. Safety is number one. We have to have understanding and power. So right there, if we can't be safe, if we're not feeling safe, you take a break right there, because that builds trust. Then you can connect, then you repair. So on this side of the water, right, is action and patterns and loyalty and honesty and confidence. And connection is dates and bids and commitment and we verbiage, right? Empathy, emotion, partnership, attachment. When we get to that point, we feel safe and we can trust and we can connect, then we repair. That's when we say, okay, you know what? I would like to repair this conversation, but it's not going to happen now because I'm flooded. It's on this side. You're unbalanced, you're uneven. You have repeated relational trauma that continues to go into patterns. Then you don't repair. Most of my clients don't get past trust because they haven't got to the connect part. They haven't learned to repair. And then they don't have boundaries because they don't feel safe enough to get to the higher purpose of the value system at the bottom is your dreams, is your foundation, is the reason why you would go back up the ladder, down the ladder, up the ladder, and keep going through these. Any questions on this? So of course, the other side is like stonewalling, which I'm going to go over in a minute. Aggressive behavior, unbalance, secrets, fear, conflict, and battling jealousy. And when you feel trapped, you're not going to feel very safe in your body. Okay, ready for the jerk book? One of my favorite books on the planet. Ready? Who's read it? Who's had it? Who's taken the course? Free course. Utah offers a free course of this. Who's been in this whole course? Who's taken the class at a university? Anybody gone through this whole book and wants to admit it? Because that would be a quite, if you haven't and no one's saying yes yet, then that makes me super excited. Because if I can introduce this book and this book only after all of got my course, then we're doing good. Anybody know about the RAM model? Nobody. So exciting. So, and maybe, this audience is young. Maybe you are looking at relationships. Maybe you are, in a relationship and you want to make sure that you're not going to fall in love with a jerk or a jerkette, then you better have this by your bedside. I have people put it on their dating profile all the time. I'm like, yeah, and I won't say what else, but all I want is this on your bedside. Anybody that's in in that space, right? Like I said, I taught it out of our marriage relations class. This was the book. So, okay. So what the RAM model is in a nutshell is this. With one of these going higher or lower than the other, then we are going to get into some discomfort. Commitment, of course. So we know someone, we trust someone, we rely on someone, and then we commit. Okay. Now think about this. Just think about one date. We get to know them, we're trusting them, we're relying on them to show up, and we commit to that time that we're going on a date. Can you move to touch? Or is this really a 3-month thing? Because statistically, like, oh yeah, statistically, if we go through 3 months, then we're on track statistically. Setting really good, healthy boundaries. Oh, I need to know you really well. I need to trust you really well. I need to rely on you and see if these patterns are going to go into patterns. Now, at the beginning, of course, we go, we're going to fall in love with potential. The way you fall in love with potential and the way that you get used is to fall in love with potential. You fall in love with patterns and you will put boundaries around those patterns and see if those patterns improve. But potential is where we usually go into. He'll change. He'll tell me this. She will do this. She will start doing that. I'll have to see. Yeah. But the patterns start out with, okay, the foundation patterns from the very, very, very beginning. So if anyone wants to share, please, in the chat, what are some patterns that you noticed early on and that you ended the relationship or didn't even start the relationship? Think about online dating or texting. I'm pretty much an expert at this. I've been divorced and remarried. So I had many years of dating in my later years. Actually, when I was teaching this class, this book. So I know what that looks like. What are some patterns that you immediately noticed? Extreme jealousy. Keep going. Anybody else? Like, did they text you back? So think about your bids. You bid something. Hey, how's your day? When would you like to make plans? And they don't even respond. That's called ghosting. Now, what's it called when they come back from the dead after a month? And you're like, where have you been? That's called what? It's called zombieing. You come back from the dead. So ghosting is like, oh, I'm just going to ghost you. And then they zombie and come back from the dead. So people that forget plans that you make, yeah, like you were on the phone and you're like, oh yeah, oh my gosh. So those are patterns of, Now if they say, you know what, oh my, I had that written down. I forgot about our plans. And the pattern is they repair that, they bid, they reach out to you, they apologize something, they bid. And you bid back and you say, you know what? It happens. We forget about plans. Okay. And you move on with your relationship. But what if it continues to happen? You decide, right? Oh, wait, no trust? Oh, wait, you haven't gotten past trust and rely. You can't trust and rely on that person because they're not committed. And are you going to go touch? So this one might be higher. If this one's up higher than the other ones, then we have an unbalance of this model. And he's scientifically, researched this model and used it. So do you want to know what a jerk is? The definition of a jerk. Anybody want to tell me in the chat of what a jerk is? or you can read it off this slide. I love it. Now, if a jerk or jerkette has all three of these, it's a pretty good strikeout. It really is. Because a jerk is someone that zombie ghosting, yes. So a jerk is someone that violates. Okay, I say violates. It's okay, they're breaking the boundaries. But a jerk or jerkette is someone that violates your boundaries. Okay. But let's talk about number 2 here. Sees things, the inability to see your perspective. Now, what's the difference between agreeing with your perspective or seeing your perspective? I mean, seeing it is all we need here. No one needs to agree with my perspective. But it's nice to have a growth mindset, it's called, to see other people's perspective. It's also the very first thinking area that I teach about in multiple classes and in thinking area classes I've taught for years is someone that is a black and white thinker. They can't see someone else's perspective. That is right there a huge, huge problem. Because go back to 1. If you can't see my perspective, which I might put up a boundary, are you going to follow my boundaries? No, you're going to violate and break my boundaries because you can't even see the perspective of the boundary. Do you see how damaging that gets? It's really quite emotionally abusive. And, someone's saying, like, having a conversation about perspective and hard feelings. Yes. So if you're having a feeling, I'm disappointed, and the other person can't see your perspective, they don't have to agree with your feeling. You have got someone that can't validate. And you say, well, I'm really disappointed in this boundary, so I'm going to put up a boundary around that disappointment. And then number 3 is they lose emotional control dangerously. Okay, so now they get mad at you because you're disappointed and mad at them, and they can't see your perspective. So then they gaslight you and put it back on you. And now they're dangerously emotionally out of control. So these are deep issues. They're not just a jerk. They are extreme personality traits that will damage a relationship. And it's really difficult to be in a relationship with someone that can't see someone else's perspective. Hard to work with them, hard to be in business with them, hard to have children with them, hard to do anything with someone that can't see your perspective. And I'm sure you know who those are when I'm saying that. This is like coming up for you, right? Okay. This is just some questions that are in the book that I put in the slide that you're going to get that you can go over. How often do you become locked in a power struggle? Do you like the way that your partner is different from you? Can you appreciate those differences? Differences, disappointment, family of origin, how that comes together, compatibility, it's all in here. Okay, another book, really quick, it's just here. I'm not going to go over it. One of my next favorite authors is Sue Johnson. 40 plus years of research and how love works. Love versus science, the love secret. But what I really want you to do is, if you are in a relationship, take my couples therapy workshop that starts Monday, little boot camp. And I talk about her book of Hold Me Tight. But this book is excellent for learning your attachment styles, how the brain works, how sex allows connection, growing into an emotional isolation or not. She is an emotional focused therapist. That's her modality that she formed, is EFT. favorite style of getting into your emotional styles. So if you do therapy, she's a great one to follow and have a therapist that knows Sue Johnson's EFT model. Obstacles are here. These are now, as we end this, they're just some handouts, okay? So here's some more skills, here's some more tools, here's some more whatever you want to call them. But we have to understand what the obstacles are and how to repair them. So this is just some ideas. Here's a PowerPoint slide on that. So the 4 horsemen, of course, are a problem in speaker listener techniques. If you're using the 4 horsemen, which I'm going to show you right now, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, stonewalling. If this is happening, again, just like the bids, 70% of the time in your relationship, criticism, contempt, little passive aggressive, roll of the eyes. Contempt is sarcasm. There's no place for criticism. There's no place for defensiveness, and there's no place for stonewalling, withdrawing emotionally and physically, disappearing. When we're doing these 4 horsemen, it causes severe damage in the relationship. So think about just any relationship. Or do these work? If you're doing them 70% of the time, you will not have a trusting relationship with somebody. So the positive, let's talk about that for just a second. Less stress, again, increased money, superior health, less anxiety and depression. There's so many positives to having a committed relationship. So we get to know your partner's world. That's the love maps. Continue general interest in one another. Those are your bids. Continue to turn toward those bids. Take time. Use the RAM model. Update your knowledge frequently through love maps. That's your app, your dates, your anything that you want to build that with. And that's time. Build safety and repair often. That's scientific. If we repair often, it's not about the conflict. It's about repairing and not using the 4 horsemen. And here's a whole bunch of books. So I have most of these all, on here. 5 love languages, of course, that we didn't talk about. What makes love last? It's great. How to build trust and avoid betrayal. Any of those Gottman ones, but Sue Johnson's listed here. I love Harriet Lerner, The Dance of Anger and Why We Don't Apologize, and How to Avoid Falling in Love with a Jerk. So what questions, anybody, any other questions that came in? Any other discussions? Someone who breaks boundaries, yes. The Jerk book. Anything else that came in, or any other comments?
I didn't get anything directly to me except for that one that we already talked about.
Great. Well, hopefully this was helpful and you have lots of resources to go in. Just pick maybe one book and dive into it and see where it takes you.
Okay, thanks everybody. We did just get one question that someone wrote in, but before everyone goes, I will send this recording out later this week. So if you want to stay for the question, awesome.
Let's answer that question. It's great. So here we've got an unstable yo-yoer, it's called, right? So someone that breaks up with you every other week, that's called an insecure attachment, which is an anxious attachment. So, and then they can go into an avoidant attachment and an anxious attachment. That's called disorganized attachment. The book for that is called Attached. And I don't know if I have that reference, but it's one of my attachment is, I am an EMDR attachment figured therapist for trauma. So you have to go back into their attachment. That will be an ongoing problem if you yo-yo, because once again, it's a problem because it's a pattern. So you're going to fall in love with potential. You're going to get a lot of yo-yoing, a lot of insecure attachment, a lot of forever, like until they heal. But the thing about attachment is those attachment styles can heal with some therapy. I do it all the time. So we go into a secure attachment, and attached is how you do that in with some therapy. So is there anything for a long distance relationship? Okay. So I have several clients, and I have a private client that has a long distance relationship. So the thing is they're not the same. Why? Because time is essential. So it depends on how much time you get spent together. So the jerk book in the later chapters talk about all the stuff that you have to do together. You have to go on vacation. You have to, if, you know, I run the divorce support group for Blomquist. We talk about blending families, how that looks, yeah. So there's a lot that goes on with second marriages. And so if you're a long distance relationship and you're not spending really good time, then it's a little bit harder, right? So it takes a little more time. Um, and that's all I can say on that. Take time, get to know the person. Lots of phone, but in person. You don't know that person until you are really stuck with them in the car, on vacation. Anything else? Yay. Well, we'll see you next time.